have an Old Testament scripture today. We're going to read from the book of Exodus, from the 4th chapter, verses 2 through 5. So hear the word of the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, "What is that in your hand?" He said, "A staff." And he said, "Throw it on the ground." So he threw the staff on the ground, and it became a snake. And Moses drew back from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Reach out your hand and seize it by the tail." So he reached out his hand and grasped it, and it became a staff in his hand. So that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. This is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Amen.
Amen.
On Thursday evening, when we were leaving Vacation Bible School, we had an incredible week. It was a long week, but an amazing week. A few of us hung back to kind of clean the room, get all the furniture back together, do some sweeping, do some mopping. And I got in my car to get back home, and I realized I only had like 10 miles of gas in my car. I said, I should probably go to the gas station. So I pulled into a gas station on the way home, and I began pumping the gas, and I leaned up against my car, and I took a deep breath. I was sort of catching my breath from a wonderful and long week, and I began to chuckle. I thought about something funny that one of the kids did, and then I got a little misty-eyed, thinking about what an amazing week it had been. To be able to connect with these kids, to make those connections with them. I received so many hugs from kids I had met that week, and it was just such an amazing experience. Well, as I was waiting for my receipt, there was this very nice police officer who walked over to me, and he said, "Good evening." I said, "Good evening, sir." And he said, "Where are you coming from tonight?" I said, "Well, I actually just came from my church. We just finished up our Vacation Bible School, and I'm actually the minister there at Harbor Methodist, just down the road over here." And we began talking about that a little bit, and I told him what a wonderful experience it was. And he said, "Well, that's great. When I saw you over there, you look really tired, and your eyes look a little glassy, and I wanted to come over here to make sure you were okay." I pointed to the back of my shirt. I said, "Yes, sir. I'm a VBS volunteer. I'm okay." And he was really nice about it, but he was doing his job. So I got in my car and I was driving back, and I was laughing about that, and I thought to myself, there is a kind of high from serving God, from volunteering your time. I didn't tell him that, of course. But there is a kind of sort of service high when you give something away, when you volunteer your time. You do sort of feel that something that's indescribable that kind of comes only from giving part of yourself away. In the evenings when we came here, the kids would gather here around 8:30 to 6, and I would get here around 5:30 to 6, and I would get here around 5:30, and there would be a few kids sort of running around, tossing a ball back and forth in here, and I would always try to engage them. We would have a parachute and beach balls, and one evening I came in, and there was a group of kids, and they were throwing a beach ball around, and I tried to engage them, and I went up to them, and I said, "Pass it here!" And they smiled at me and ran the other way. So I walked over there and I said, "Here, throw it right here." They smiled at me and just kept running the other way. And then I realized as one of them said it, they were playing a game that they made up on the spot. And literally the game was called "Don't Give Pastor Russ the Ball." And I got to tell you, they were pretty good at it. And I wasn't sure, should I be insulted, should I be flattered by this, And I chose to be flattered by it. But one of the things that I love about working with these kids at VBS is that their imagination is so flexible. They are so flexible. I mean, those of you who have children right now are like, "Yeah, I know." But they can just come up with a game like that on the spot and entertain themselves for a really long time. Like, "Don't Give the Ball to Pastor Russ," a new classic. And that's part of why I love Vacation Bible School, is interacting with these children who have this wild and vivid imagination. It takes me back. And part of what we tap into at VBS is that imagination side of things. The theme this week was kind of a space aesthetic journeying to Mars, and every day we began by gathering in the space, and we went to a new planet every night, the planet of peace, the planet of love. And as we were watching a video of these teenagers acting out a scene, going to the planet of love, I looked out over these kids and I thought to myself, it's not likely, but it's entirely plausible that one of these kids might actually go to Mars. I mean, there are private companies right now developing journeys to Mars, and in 30 or 40 years, maybe there's a 5-year-old who was here this week who might actually step foot on the red planet. Maybe we were planting that seed of wonder and awe that will allow them to sort of imagine when they go look at the stars at night that maybe they could travel there as well. We're tapping into that through PBS. And I've been a part of a lot of these things now. One of the primary goals is to take that vivid imagination that's already within inside of them and to show them a holy imagination. Something that they can see beyond what they can see. They can see something that God is doing with them. Whereas they can pick a stick up outside and it can be a sword. It can be a baseball bat. It can be a lightsaber. We want them to pick something up and for them to see what God can do with that through them. That's an invitation I give to you this morning as well. An invitation to have a holy imagination. Arthur Brooks, who's a social scientist, he's pretty popular. He recently published an article a couple weeks ago. And really intriguing, it kind of made the rounds on Facebook. But for 3 years, he did research on why he kept seeing these people who were successful in life, professionally and personally, who reached a point in their early 30s or early 40s, mid-40s, who just got really kind of down and depressed, and they couldn't figure out what was going on in their life. We call this, a midlife crisis, right? When you reach that point in life where nothing is really fulfilling, nothing's really satisfying for you anymore. And he said, what is this about? In particular, why is it happening to the most successful people? People who are achieving their professional goals. They went to school for this, and they finally got that job they wanted, or they wanted to get married, and they wanted to have kids, and they got there, but then they reached a point in life, in their late 30s, early 40s, mid-40s, where that just wasn't enough. And they couldn't figure out why. And so some of them, they go out and they buy a fancy sports car or whatever to sort of make up for that and try to figure out what's going on. And he was very intrigued by that. And what he discovered is that people in their 20s and 30s, that's all of us in this room right now, he said that those are like prime resume building years professionally. You have a goal in mind professionally, you strive for that, you work toward that, but then you reach a point where if you do achieve that level, you say, well, what's next? And personally, you get married and you have kids, and it's the same thing. Well, maybe they're graduating now, and you're saying to yourself, what is next? And so Arthur Brooks was trying to get to the core of that. The second most popular book that's ever been written in all of Christendom was by a guy named Rick Warren, The Purpose-Driven Life. And I think one of the reasons it was so popular is because it began with 4 simple words. Why am I here? Why am I here? And he said that why is at the core of what we struggle with in our midlife crises. Viktor Frankl said, those who have a compelling why in life can overcome anyhow. And it's possible that some of you here this morning are stuck with your house. You don't know how you're going to do this. You don't know how you're going to do this. Mentally, you can't process how this is going to happen. Maybe your why isn't compelling enough right now. That could be you. And that is what Arthur Brooks determined. He said when you reach that age in your 40s or whatever that is for you, he said you have to find a deeper, richer, more meaningful why. It can't be your career anymore. Your career may be satisfying you right now, but that can only last so long. You reach a point in your life, if you haven't gotten there already, is coming, when you need a deeper, richer, more meaningful why. Moses, today, he was the opposite. He wasn't successful. He was a failure. He went from prince to pasture. Never has there been a bigger gap than what Moses had, right? And so not only was he a failure as a leader, he was a failure to his people, he was a failure morally because he was a murderer. And by the grace of God, he went into the wilderness, he survived, he got married, and he had children, and he was perfectly content for the rest of his life tending sheep. Tending sheep. And then one normal, average day, God broke through a burning bush into his life and said, no, Moses, no, you're not going to tend sheep anymore. I got a better idea. I want you to go back to Egypt and free my people. There's only like 1 million of them, and that's what I want you to do. Mind you, Moses is 80, okay? Moses is in like quasi-retirement. He bought his house in Wilmington. He's hanging out with his family now. He's perfectly content tending sheep for the rest of his life. And so when God tells him this, he's like, no, I don't believe this. And there's a back and forth between them. Moses says, I'm not worthy. They're not going to believe me. I'm not a good public speaker. I mean, he's thinking of every excuse until finally God plays his hand, literally his hand, and he asks them a very simple question. Moses, what is in your hand? And I'm sure Moses was like, well, it's a staff. It's a stick. It's got a little hook on it. I use it for hooking the sheep and bringing them back. I maybe use it for kind of climbing up a mountain for some rough terrain. It's a stick. Like, what do you want from me, man? This was all that he had in his possession in that moment was a stick. And God said, throw that thing down. And of course, when he did, it turned into a snake. He said, pick it up by the tail. And when he did it turned back into a stick. And Moses had not the imagination or the inclination to see what was in his hand. He could not see that this stick would one day intimidate Pharaoh. That this stick would one day, when risen up, would part the Red Sea. That this stick would one day be the thing that 1 million people look at to be free from slavery. That this stick would one day touch a rock and water would flow through it. That this stick would one day be the thing that he used to pull himself up the Mount Sinai and to get the 10 Commandments. He could not see what this was. He had not the holy imagination. And so, I want to ask you this morning, what is in your hand? What is in your hand today? What gifts, what time, what talents do you have that are available to you? Do you see what the possibilities? Because when you quit seeing, you quit believing. And when you quit believing, you quit becoming. There was a parent that came up to me this week. Molly mentioned earlier, we raised $500 for these orphans in India. It's remarkable. It's the most we've ever raised for VBS. And these kids, they were probably cleaning out their parents' change drawer, right? And they come in with like a zip bag full of change. They're like, I got money. And so they go put it in the bucket. So they go over to the bucket, and one coin by one, they loved hearing that sound of those coins dropping, right? And then one parent came up to me later. And they said, something special happened. One of my kids put some money that they had been saving to spend on a family vacation. And they were putting it in the buckets, a good bit of money. And they said, they went to the kid and they said, are you sure you want to do this? That's a lot of money. You've been saving that money to spend on vacation. Are you sure you want to do this? And you know what they said? They said, yeah, because those orphans in India, they need this more. And you know how much it was? It was $100. $100. And I just kept thinking about that all week long. And I thought, there are people in this world who have never released more than $100 to God or to a charity because they just didn't trust that some good could come from it. What is in your hands? The Mayo Clinic recently did some wide-ranging research to sort of see the benefits that volunteers have when they volunteer their hours and wherever they're volunteering. They interviewed over 2,000 people to figure out what are the sort of physical, psychological, spiritual benefits, and they determined that those who volunteer regularly, they actually are more physically and emotionally fit, they have lower blood pressure, they have a reduced risk of depression, and that leads to a longer life. I'm reading a great book right now called Why Good Things Happen to Good People. It's a book that has this comprehensive research about the positive effects of giving. And in one of their cases, they researched these teenagers who were like helping teenagers. They gave financially, they gave out of their allowance or their summer jobs, or they volunteered in various places, not because they had to, because they wanted to. And they determined that these teenagers who did this, they were reaping benefits, both psychological and mental and physical and spiritual benefits that they would be reaping for decades, for the rest of their life. There was another research done by Carnegie Mellon University of adults over the age of 50, and that's no one here, so use your imagination, but adults over the age of 50, and they determined that adults over the age of 50 who volunteer at least 5 hours a month actually have lower blood pressure and will probably live a longer life. It's almost as if we were made to thrive with a more meaningful and deeper and richer why. When you have a why that is deep and rich and meaningful, you thrive, whether you realize it or not. Many of you have probably seen the show The Beverly Hillbillies. It's a real classy sermon. But you remember Jed Clampett, right? I mean, maybe you could do the Jed Clampett voice, maybe? Okay. So Jed Clampett, before he became rich, before he moved to Beverly Hills, like he lived under an ocean of oil, having no idea what was beneath him, having no idea how wealthy he could have been. And what he discovered, he moved to Beverly Hills, baby, right? And I feel like maybe many of us are living in that sort of doldrums without a very compelling why. We don't see what is available to us. We don't see the abundance that is available to us if we just had the imagination to see what was in our hands. My wife and I recently went to the Hoover Dam, and if you've never been to the Hoover Dam, I highly recommend it. It is definitely worth it. And we went, and I have this thing where I collect magnets from every place I go to. Like my office is full of magnets, and if you were to look inside my closet, you would say, whoa, that's a lot of magnets, man. But I collect one everywhere I go to. And so I went to the visitor center, and it was almost closing time. It was about 5 till 5, and they were already turning out the lights. And you know what turning out the lights means, right? Get out. We're ready to go home, right? And so people are locking up, they're cleaning things, and my family's already outside because they got the message, but I didn't because I wanted a magnet. So I get in line, and I am the last guy in line, right? And so I'm waiting, and I realize it's like after 5, and the lights are out, and people are walking out. And so I check out my magnet, it's $2, right? Very important to me. And then she says, do you want your receipt? I said, oh, no, thank you, I'm good. And she says, okay, well, great. We'll have a great damn day. For a split second, I was like, excuse me? It's just a receipt, you know? And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, we're at the Hoover Dam. I see what you did there. And I went outside and I told my family, and my nephew was like, you think she works here because she can curse people out without me watching? It's kind of funny. We were in the visitor center. They had this great museum, and we wanted to go to the observation point to actually see the dam. And they told us the elevator was out and that we had to take the damn stairs. See how that works? And so, but all night long, I was chuckling about that little joke. Like, I was driving the car. She got me. It was 12 a.m. in the airport, and I was exhausted and cranky. And I was like, that was good, though. I really thought she was serious, you know? And just that little extra wit, that little joke, when everyone else is being rude, I smile back at her and she goes, yeah. That little bit extra. That actually made a little difference. Because I had a long drive back home. And so it made me think about the story that maybe you heard. It was a gentleman living in San Francisco, and he was really down on life, and so down that he was contemplating suicide. And so his plan one day was to go out into the middle of the Golden Gate Bridge and to jump off. And he said to himself, if anyone stops me and talks to me, I won't jump. And then it became, if anyone lifts up their eyes and acknowledges me, if anyone smiles at me, I will not jump. And so he goes to the middle of the bridge, and after having seen no one who even acknowledged that he existed, he jumped off. The only reason we know this is because he actually survived. He's one of the few people that have survived that jump. And so imagine, think for a moment, if you were walking by someone and you had an opportunity to smile or to tell a joke, no matter how bad it is. My philosophy is, even if it's a bad joke, tell it, because it might brighten someone's day, right? If you have an opportunity to do that, maybe That's what's in your hand in the moment. Maybe that opportunity exists because you can change someone's life. Maybe you're not called to free an entire people from slavery, but maybe you're called to have a significant role in someone's life on a particular day. What is in your hands? I found that in my ministry, the biggest impact I have isn't the stuff that I plan day to day and put on my calendar. It's the opportunities that God just gives me in a moment. It's God saying, hey, I need you to go here all of a sudden. I need you to talk to this person all of a sudden. Call this person all of a sudden and just see how they're doing. Those little moments, those little interruptions is where I find God the most. I think it was John Lennon who said that life is what happens when you're, busy making plans. Moses had a plan. His plan was to tend the sheep. And God interrupted and said, no, I got a different plan for you instead. You're going to be going over here now. What interruptions do you have in your lives? The Reverend Otis Moss Jr. tells a story. He was called to the hospital one day to visit one of his parishioners. She was supposed to have a leg amputated. And so he goes to the hospital room and he's thinking about what he could say to her. And he gets up there, and as soon as he arrives, she says, Reverend, I came to this hospital expecting to have my leg removed. But now they just told me this morning that they're going to amputate both of my legs. He said, wow, okay. He said, I'm seminary trained. I'm trained in pastoral care. That is a tough one. And he was really searching for the right words. I mean, what do you say to someone who is going through this? And he said there was this awkward kind of silence, as he was trying to search for the words. And then she actually broke the silence. And she said something that he was trying to find. And she said, ever since the doctor told me that, I've been sitting here thinking all morning of all of the wonderful things that I could do with my hands. And she began to list all of the great things that she could do for other people with her hands. And she said to him, when I get out of here and I'm totally healed, the first thing I'm going to do with my hands is I'm going to bake you a cake. She said, I don't know how I'm going to reach the counter yet, but I'm going to find a way to bake you a cake. I'm going to work this out because that is what I can do with these two hands. And so again, I ask you, what is in your hands? The Reverend Mike Slaughter has said, I've heard him say this multiple times, that in order to increase what you have in your hands, you have to release it. In the same way that Moses released the staff to God, you have to release it and trust that God can do something amazing with it. So again, I say to you, what is in your hands? Let's pray. Lord, you have blessed us a million times over in ways we cannot perceive, Lord. You have given us time, you've given us gifts, you've given us energy and creativity and talent. And now, God, help us to use these things to serve a higher purpose, to have a deeper and richer and more meaningful why. Lord, if there's someone here this morning who is in those doldrums, who maybe is having a kind of spiritual crisis today, wondering what is that why for them, Lord, I pray that you would reveal it to them. I pray that you would show them what is in their hands and give them the faith and the courage to release it to you. In your name we pray. Amen.